Life isn't happening to you. It's happening because of you. And every outcome begins with what? Say it with me. Choice. The moment that you make a choice, you set off a chain reaction. And that formula of choice and responsibility, accountability to the outcome, you own it, belongs to you. That's the formula. We talk about every week, at the beginning of every podcast of what is the formula. That's it. The simplicity of it is just, it's just beautiful. And it's so rich and easy to follow. I was telling somebody yesterday, my friend Michelle, we were discussing it, and I said, it doesn't care what your gender is. It doesn't care what your ethnicity is. It doesn't care what your religion is. It doesn't care about any of that. That formula is rooted in reality, in nature itself, because you will be obligated to those qualities, whether you like it or not. And reality will always find a way. Let's get into it. Good morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting a standard. You are setting a standard for accountability, responsibility, and everything that follows. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. What does that mean? And everything that follows. Well, all the outcomes that happen as a result of your choices. So, okay, before we go any further, let's ask this real question. How do you define choice? How are you defining what a choice is? Choice isn't just about options. Right? It's not. Yes, it is, but it's not. It is that conscious exercise of will that directs your energy, your agency into form of some kind. It's your authorship, if you will, or your ownership. It's that moment that you decide what version of yourself is going to move forward. I like to define choice as that act of assigning direction to my awareness. Because I'll tell you, wherever your awareness goes, your life is going to follow. If you're paying attention to this lane, you can't be paying attention to that lane. So, and choice is not about, what's right or wrong, are good or bad. It's just about the alignment for you. It's about you choosing for you. When you choose from integrity of those qualities, the outcome harmonizes with your life. You will see and feel and experience things easy. When you choose from fear or ego, then you see the outcome and how it exposes the distortion of reality. And that's why I call this forensics, because outcomes are evidence, right? It's real world understanding. It's in your face. Here's the outcome from the choice that you made. And to be honest, they show exactly where you were standing when you made that choice. Were you standing in truth or were you standing in distortion? And the thing that is important to me, and I think it is important to you as well, is when you're talking about how do I define what choice is? Choice is the thing that you do every moment of every day. People often will think to themselves that the choice is I bought a house, or I got a new job, or I decided to get married, or I went to travel, or, I did this, I did that. But they're not realizing that choice is everything that you do or say. everything that comes out of your mouth, everything that goes into your mouth, right? Every situation where you're getting out of bed in the morning and you're making a choice. I made a choice to get up on the right side of the bed or the left side of the bed. I chose to stand up. I made a choice to walk to the kitchen and make coffee. I chose that coffee. I chose that cup. I chose to put this much coffee into the filter in order to filter the coffee. I chose this much Splenda or sugar. Or do you see what I'm saying? It's like the choice, everything is a choice. As I sit here talking to you, my left hand is moving, as though you're sitting here across from me and we're having a discussion. I make that choice. The extreme ownership of your choices will eliminate you from ever being a victim. And that is huge, because when you filter the world through being a victim, that victimization, then you start seeking entitlement. Woe is me, you owe me. Well, you owe me is an entitlement. So you can alleviate that from your life by defining for yourself, what do I think a choice actually is? How am I defining what a choice is? Am I forgetting all of this other stuff and I only think that I'm making a choice when it's a big purchase, when it's a big life event? Or am I understanding and realizing it's everything I do or say? I've told this story before about how when I was in New York, I went through this challenge for myself where I questioned everything I was doing. And it wasn't to ask why, it was just to say, I got up and decided to go to the kitchen. What was that reason? Once I got there, what was that reason? And owning every choice that I made. The choice to get up, the choice to walk around the table, the choice to walk into the kitchen, the choice to open the cupboard, the choice to open the refrigerator. All of that is a choice. And if you own that choice, then you alleviate from yourself regret. Because when you own it, there's nothing to regret. Why? Because I made the choice. When you don't own the choice, that's when you're playing games and you're scamming yourself. And then you're burdening other people in your world, the world around you, with whatever the outcome was and whatever your response to it was. So I want to make sure that, and we'll come back to this at some other point too, but I want to make sure that that piece of it has an opportunity to integrate for you about how do you define choice. And please, drop that into the comments. I had somebody on X say to me the other day, oh, well, isn't this, this is kind of a duh type of philosophy. If it is, then more people would be doing it, which means there would be less chaos in life and more harmony. And then my response to him was, clearly you've never developed these qualities, otherwise you would never have written that response. Because when you're in choice, you're in integrity and character. You would not address another human being that way, right? So a lot of people will say to me, but Greg, I didn't have a choice. If you have ever said that, I encourage you to pause right here. Because that's not the voice of reality. That's the voice of avoidance. You always have a choice. You may not like the choices, but you always have a choice. And I used to say, there used to be a valid choice or not an invalid choice. That's not even the case. It's still a choice. It doesn't matter how you subjectively put value on the choice. It's still a choice. But, sometimes like the choices available, they challenge the identity that you're protecting. If you've image built your whole life, then you're going to be making choices to protect that image rather than being genuine with yourself. And that means you have to keep that up for the rest of your life. Really? I don't know about you, but I got to a point where I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to do this. This is too much work. I want to enjoy my life. But I had to move to this place of understanding what is a choice. How do I define choice? And then how does it play such a part in my world? Well, I don't want to accept the responsibility that comes with it. People are often saying that when they say, that they don't believe they have a choice. Really, that's what they're saying is, I don't want to accept the responsibility that comes with the choice and the outcome. I'll tell you what, though, liberation will only happen when you're willing to take responsibility for a prior choice. Look, you can't change the past. Believe me, I know. But you can release that enslavement to it by owning it. That's where I say there's no regret. No such thing. Why? Because I own it. I didn't like it. Okay. In the aggregate, I look back and go, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. That's the way it goes. Okay. Move on. If you're still trying to live, do no harm to self or others, great. And if you did, you know what? Bless it and move on. Because you could spend your lifetime in mental anguish over something that you did 50 years ago that nobody even remembers. You just can't change that past. And once you do let go of it, believe me, the weight will lift. Responsibility frees you. It will bring you freedom. That chain of ownership of choice. Remember we talked about the string to the rope to the bell to the cow, right? That's how that workflow goes. This is how nature's flow goes. Choice, responsibility, accountability, outcome. And that's it. That's the formula. It's simple. It's easy. Everyone can do it. Everyone can learn it. It doesn't require any station in life other than you saying, yes, I want to make a choice. I was telling my friend Michelle yesterday, and I've said this before on the podcast, you can change your life in a Thanos snap, just like that. Just by saying, yes, I take responsibility for the choice. Your whole life will change. Everything will unfold from there that will continue to help you and encourage you and urge you on to be the best that you can be. So choice is a little bit like jumping out of a plane. But the thing that's really cool is you always have a parachute. And what is the parachute? It's your ability to scam yourself. So when you pull the ripcord and you look up, you'll see the word scam. You'll see the words scamming myself. Responsibility is packing your own parachute, right? You do it. You don't rely on someone else. Accountability is owning what happens when you pull that cord. If you outsource the packing, you don't get to blame gravity. It doesn't work that way. Every fall, every flight, every landing tells you who packed your parachute. Was it you or someone else? Are you taking ownership? Are you managing your life? Or are you outsourcing it to other people by blaming other people and not taking responsibility? Integrity and the distraction of desire are two things that are in conflict with each other, of course, and people are mired in it. So here's where I think people complicate choice, and I know that I did, that they focus on what the choice should bring. I'm going to make a choice, and this is what I want to have happen. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And what are you going to do when it doesn't happen? How do you pivot? How do you flex your style to say, oh, okay, that's okay? And if the outcome doesn't bring what you wanted, then you sit there and think, oh, well, I chose wrong. But that's not true, right? You can sit there and say, that it didn't satisfy, what I wanted to have happen. I thought it was going to go in another direction. It did. Not necessarily in the direction that you thought you wanted, but maybe it was the direction that was needed. And here's the secret. It was the direction that was needed. But, people think, well, I chose wrong because I didn't get what I wanted. But it's just not true. The purpose of a choice is growth, not necessarily gratification, although that is a byproduct of it. But your choice is a growth of you. It's you developing you. When your choices are dependent on others, like for approval or validation or security, whatever it is, you have given away your self-reliance, right? And you're no longer choosing for yourself. You're just negotiating for permission from other people in other situations. And yet, even that will serve you. Because if you're listening to this podcast right now, that means that you are open to the possibilities of what choice can do for you in your life, the power that it gives you, the freedom that it gives you. Because you know that you will make a choice, you will be free in that choice, but at the same time, I will be able to the choice and I will be accountable. But I will say that if you are not paying attention to what serves you and only paying attention to how the outcome goes for you, I think you're going to be disappointed in life. Because what will happen is it will show you where you've surrendered your power. If you've outsourced it to someone else or if you've taken it on. And I'll tell you what, until you reclaim the responsibility that is obligated to you by nature, you will just keep calling dependence love and you'll call avoidance loyalty. People of high integrity don't make wrong choices. There's no such thing because their choices are aligned with their standard, not their emotions. And that was another thing that I had another conversation about this morning, was that you can tell that reality is thinking and emotions are not thinking. You're not thinking when you're being emotional. But when you're thinking, you're actually seeing reality. When you're being emotional, you are distorting reality. There's a thought that I had about the forensics of what I called victimhood, right? I had to is a hidden, kind of thing, a euphemism of sorts of I chose to avoid. Well, I had to do that. No, you chose to avoid because you're not comfortable saying no, because you're not comfortable moving away from something instead of moving toward something else. And I'm telling you, when you believe you're trapped, that forensic question is, what am I getting from believing that? What am I getting from believing that? I don't know. Maybe you think it's comfort or attention. Maybe it's some illusion of safety. You've decided to outsource your safety to somebody else. But every one of those keeps you from freedom. And isn't that ultimately what you want? Because freedom brings peace. Everyone's story is going to begin with the choices they made, which created the outcomes they experience. And that's how this works. Look, no one is coming to save you. No matter how much they say they will. And even if they do, that's not saving you. Really and truly, you know what that's doing? That is robbing you of the experience of saving yourself. Of figuring out, how do I manage this life that I'm living? And I'll tell you what, you can reclaim your agency, because when outcomes don't feel good, trace them backwards. I've always wanted to have an interview with people on the street, and I still may do this, where I start to ask people, how do you define choice for yourself? And then what's a choice that you've made that you did not take responsibility for? And walk them through it. How do you walk it back? What was I trying to control or avoid when I made that choice? Or what was the choice aligned with my standard or my comfort? How was I avoiding? How was I facing it? How was I scamming myself? Because when you answer honestly, you will stop repeating these cycles. Oops, what did I just say? That's right, I'm going to say it again. When you answer honestly, you will stop repeating cycles. Responsibility isn't about punishment. It's actually about freedom. Accountability could look like, punishment if you were doing something that harmed another. When you own your choices, you stop reacting to life and you start directing it. You start deciding it. And that's how you transform chaos into harmony. Chaos into clarity. Reaction into creation. And that is a beautiful thing. Your choices will reveal your character when you develop accountability and responsibility. Every decision is a reflection of your standard. And when you choose consciously, you reclaim your sovereignty, your freedom, not just over the outcomes, but over your own peace. And I want to take you back to that first question that I had. How are you defining what a choice is? Because if you're ignoring all the little tiny choices that lead to the big choice, you got a problem. You got a problem that you got to figure out. Because it's all those things. It's almost as though saying that when people say this is the time that somebody was born and this is the time they died, and it's the dash in between. Okay? The dash in between, those are all the small choices that you've made that you haven't taken responsibility for, that you haven't been accountable for. You saw that clip from the movie Nuts, where the hooker is sitting there saying, if I do this, I'm responsible. If I do this, I'm responsible. I knew what I was doing every minute. You have to know what you're doing every minute. I've said it so many times. You can't know where you're going unless you know what it is you're doing. And when you know what you're doing, now you know where you're going. Now look, life is a mystery and it'll be fun and it'll unfold itself. But what's so great about it is that you will have success and happiness beyond anything you thought possible if you will do that one thing in life. In that Thanos snap, say yes and take responsibility. Take ownership of every choice. So, hey, if you think about it, drop a note in the comments for me. Let me know this is how I defined a choice before this podcast. Now this is how I define it. Or if you haven't even changed it, that's okay too. Hit that like button if you would, of course. Share this with your family and friends. You never know how it might support them in their own endeavor. All the fun links are below, and if you're inclined, feel free to subscribe on Buzzsprout. I do now have my Christmas book out called The Christmas Cookie that kind of weaves some of these themes through it, and I may do a podcast as we get closer to Christmas about it. Maybe read a story or two from it, because they're really beautiful stories. What else? I'm on X and Truth Social and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay free, and always, as always, remember, let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Make it a terrific week, and you know what? Happy Halloween.